Texas, they told me that if I didn't like their weather, wait a minute. That's because it changed so fast that it didn't take long to go from one nasty weather to one good one. I was on the bus going to my house from seminary, and it was completely dark. And it was during the day because it was so overcast and rain was pouring like cats and dogs in buckets. 20 minutes later, I get home and it is bright, sunny, and the only clue that we have of the rain is the banks of the river are overflowing. And the water is actually on some of the fields. So you can't even go out to the field and step on the field because there's about 6 inches of water. Normally, there is no water on the field because it's next to the bank of the river, and the river is about 6 or 8 feet, below the surface of the field. And you wouldn't even think that the water would reach that high, but it did. And it took about 2 days for the water to actually subside. Well, in our story this morning, the weather could change like that. And here Jesus, uncharacteristically, is sleeping during all of this mess. We begin with chapter 4 in Mark, verses 35 through 41. That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Very, very brief story, and there's a lot of things that are going on. Because just before this, they were in ministry. And the reason why they had to get in a boat was because there were so many people on shore that he used the water as a microphone or a megaphone. If you've ever spoken to people across a pond, it doesn't take a whole lot of voice to get to the other side because the water carries it. And so all of these people are on shore, and so Jesus got in one of the boats and he started speaking and using the water so that the people on shore could hear it. Well, after all of that preaching took place, he said, "Let's go to the other side." And while they were going, it was this mega storm. Now, the mega storm is not a surprising phenomenon in that region and over the water because it happened frequently. But I don't think it happened to the degree that it happened here, because the disciples were seriously fearing for their lives. It must have been a storm that they've never experienced. I mean, they come quickly and they leave quickly. And from what I heard, it's still like that today. If you go over there to the Sea of Galilee and in that region, the storm comes and then it leaves, just like the Texas ones. If you don't like the weather, wait a minute. So when they couldn't stand it any longer and the storm was raging, they had to wake up Jesus as he was sleeping, and I don't know how he could have been sleeping on a stormy day like that. But he was, And so they had to finally wake him and ask him to do something about it. And what was amazing was that when Jesus told the wind and the waves to stand still, or to, here's a loose translation, shut up. Told the wind to shut up. And they did. He told nature to do something, and they did it. Or it did it. Last time I told a rock to jump, it didn't do anything. Now when I tell my kids to get my keys, they do it. But I've never told a rock to do something and it actually obeyed me. I never said anything to the wind. I never said anything to snow or the sky. No matter how choppy the water is, I don't tell it to stop, because I know it doesn't work. So Jesus demonstrates that he is sovereign over nature. And let's try to swallow that a little bit. Jesus is sovereign over nature. Nature obeys him. We have to let that soak for a minute. In chapter 1, verses 1 through, chapter 5 in Mark, of verses 1 through 20, he's sovereign over demons. Shortly after this, it's demonstrated that Jesus commands demons and they obey him. In verses 21 through 43 in the same chapter, he is sovereign over death. So he tells death what to do, and death obeys him. Now that's crazy. Pretty nuts. But common in these sections is a fear of those situations. Whether we fear nature, or we fear demons, or we fear death, there's fear all over this section or the book of Mark, and Jesus takes care of all of that. They all respond in the same way. Jesus commands, and it obeys. So here what we have is the disciples fearing for their lives. And when the pigs were or when the demons were cast out, and the demons went into the pigs, and they all drowned in the lake, the people who owned the town or lived in the town feared Jesus and sent him away. There was a woman who was healed from 12 years of bleeding, and when she was healed, she also feared Jesus. When a synagogue ruler was fearing for her daughter's life, Jesus came to rescue her and comforted him by bringing her back to life. In all of these situations, here are people who fear, and here is Jesus coming to the rescue. Now, why didn't Jesus fear? Why wasn't he afraid of the storm? Why was he able to sleep through it? Let's explore that for a minute. There's only a few reasons why somebody could actually experience deep sleep during a storm. I don't know if they had any coverings on the boat. A little structure that he could just go into and sleep so that the water doesn't splash on his face. It's most likely that he didn't have that. This is a fishing boat, and it wasn't their practice to have one of those. So I'm thinking that he's just in the back, on a cushion, sleeping while all of this is going on, and the water is splashing over his face. And I don't know if he was in the water or slightly above the water, but water was coming into the boat to the point where the disciples were fearing that they're going to all drown. Because when the water gets full, then they're all going to be floating. And they're only going to float for a little while until the waves overtake them, and then they'll be sinking. So how could an individual sleep in these conditions? I mean deep sleep, to the point where they had to go shake him and wake him up. Alright, let me give us three options. One, an individual can sleep like this if he's drunk. Alright, did you ever see situations, because I have, when you slap a drunk person, then nothing happens? Yeah, nothing happens. Like, he doesn't even feel it. As a matter of fact, that's what they say. And as a matter of fact, that's what Proverbs says. They slap me, but I don't feel it. So a drunk person is totally oblivious to the surroundings because all the sensitivity is gone. So if you were drunk, then, you know, buckets of water could be poured on his face and he would still be sleeping. We know Jesus wasn't drunk, nor was he drugged. So we eliminate that from the equation. He was completely and totally, utterly tired. Now, there are times when we are like that, we're totally drenched in exhaustion, and because of that, not a whole lot of things could wake us up. So Jesus could have been so tired that he could sleep through a storm. The third option is that he is totally secure and not worried about anything. You know, like a baby. Babies are totally secure, they can sleep through anything. And when they're in deep sleep, you try to, you know, shake them up, wake them up, and they just turn over. Now, my guess is it's a combination of the two, that he is really fatigued, because there's a lot of ministry going on, and he is totally secure. So he is able to sleep through the storm because he is secure and he is tired. All the ministry that he's been doing is catching up. So let me give you some observations, a little brief one. Okay? It's okay to sleep. Hey, look at that. Somebody just relieved. My pastor said I could sleep. Okay. You can sleep securely if you're not lazy. The qualifier. If you're lazy, then get up. Do something. Okay. But when it's time to sleep and you've done ministry or you've done work and you are tired, by all means sleep. Rest. God has given us that. As a matter of fact, there's something wrong with us when in the Old Testament God had to command us to rest. We're a bunch of workaholics. But God says, no, you can rest, it's okay. I give you permission to rest. As a matter of fact, I command you to rest. Don't do anything. Man, I wish my wife was like that. Honey, you don't have to do any chores, just rest. Are you serious? None of this, none of that, do this, no honey-do list? Sometimes she does, let me rest. She's not all that bad. So here we are, Jesus secure, needing rest, sleeping, and the storm comes up. Okay. Now, finally, when the disciples can't take it any longer, they wake up Jesus because they think they're going to die. And Jesus then wakes up and does a miracle. He rebukes the wind and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still. Shut up and freeze." And the waves and the wind, they shut up and they freeze. And it says, it was completely calm. It says the wind died. You know what death is, right? I've never seen a dead person move. It's completely still. So the wind died, and it was completely calm. And this is what Jesus said in verse 40. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And you know, that's bad wording, right? Isn't that bad wording? Jesus should have said, "Why were you so afraid?" Because they were, right? And he says, did you have no faith? That's what he should have said. He should have said, "Why were you afraid?" And did you have no faith? Of course they had faith. They had faith in Jesus. They woke him up. Okay? But it is this reaction. The statement is spoken because of what he said after. We find out why he said that because in verse 41 it says, they were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Okay? Now, they were initially afraid of the storm. They thought they were going to die until Jesus got up and rebuked the wind and the waves. Now, they are no longer worried about the storm. I mean, by the way, it's calm anyway. But that was not the point. Because even though the wind and the waves were calm, they were still terrified. Why were they terrified? Because this Jesus, I mean, he just stopped the wind and the wave. And I could just picture it in my mind. Here's the boat, you know, there's 12 of them, so it has to be pretty big. Okay? I mean, relatively speaking, it has to be big. And the 12 disciples are on one side of the boat. Jesus is on the other side of the boat. They don't have any more room to move back. Because they're running out of space on the boat. I want to keep him away from me as far as possible. Because this guy talks to the wind and the wave and they obey him. Wow, that's a strange sight. That's an awesome sight. Whoa. So Jesus is over here saying, "Why are you afraid? Why do you have no faith?" He wasn't talking about Jesus not having the ability to calm the situation. No. What was Jesus saying? "Why are you moving away from me? Don't you know that I have power not to destroy you, but to take care of you? You don't have to move away. You don't have to fear me. Didn't I just take care of this situation? Yes, it's the taking care of the situation that makes me afraid of you. Because I have never seen that kind of power before. We have never seen that kind of power before. I've never seen anybody talk to a rock and it obey him. You spoke to nature and nature immediately obeyed you. You are a strange phenomenon to us. You are so awesome, we don't know how to handle you. What do we do with you, Jesus? It's not why were you afraid, it's why are you afraid? Present fear and fear directed to Jesus. Before the storm, they were thinking, we're going to die for sure. I don't know whether they were thinking whether Jesus was going to die or not. They probably didn't. Jesus can take care of himself. It's we who are going to be destroyed if this storm keeps up. I mean, he can take care of himself, but let's call him and ask him to save us. Not, including Jesus, because Jesus won't die. After the storm, it was, you might kill us. You frighten us. You are unpredictable. You frighten us. You can't be controlled. You frighten us. You make us uncomfortable. You frighten us. You are too powerful. You frighten us. We don't really know you. We really don't know you. You frighten us. We fear the unknown. Honestly speaking, we just want God to be predictable. We want Him to be controllable, and we want Him to be manageable. Right? That's the way we like it. Because then we're really in control. Somebody controlling us is destabilizing. I didn't want to be a Christian because of that. When I was confronted with the gospel, I said, I'm 20 years old. You mean to tell me for another 60 years somebody else is going to tell me what to do? Somebody else is going to lead me? Somebody else has to be in control? Well, I don't want that. And so I didn't want to be a Christian. I mean, I was struggling with that. And as I thought about it, I said, man, I want to know the Lord. I want to go to heaven, but I don't want to be controlled. I just don't want to be somebody else's slave. So I didn't want that. But that's the way He is. He is the one who tells us what to do. And this is how we normally live. We normally live our lives based on fear. What if I lose my job? What if I lose my husband or my wife? What if I lose my kids? What if I lose my home? What if I fail in life? What if I fail my major? I know Chinese don't fear failing a grade. They fear B's. Right? What if I get a B? Oh, tragedy. What if I never find a mate? You know, when I used to fear that, yeah, let me tell you my story. When I used to fear, what if I never get married? Okay? That was when I had little faith. Okay? But it grew. Because later on, when I was interacting with the Lord, I was thinking, will you ever provide for me a wife? Okay? I wanted to be married at 26. I got married at 31. I had to wait another 5 years. Okay? But here, when I was interacting with Him like that, I said, will I ever get married? He reminded me, how many people does He provide mates for? I mean, if we look around and we go, okay, all of these people are married. God provided for them. I'm thinking, if God provides for non-Christians, how much more will He provide for us? For His children, right? So I said, man, my fears are unwarranted. I'm not going to fear anymore. I'm just going to live my life. I'm going to follow Him, and I'm going to predict that He's going to provide for me. So in my first ministry at GMC, when I got there, I was going to work full-time. And so when I first got there and started working full-time, I grabbed some musicians and I said, would you do my music for my wedding? And he goes, that would be my pleasure. Are you seeing anybody now? I said, no. But when I get one, would you do original music for my wedding? He said, sure. Okay. So as soon as I found my wife, this was how many years later? A year later. Okay, I said, you better start getting ready for my wedding. And he says, really? Well, when do you plan to get married? I said, in 4 months. And he goes, didn't you just tell me, and he asked me, like in the month of January, didn't I ask you if you were seeing anybody? And I said, yeah. And didn't you tell me that you weren't seeing anybody? And I said, yeah. But you're getting married? And this is in February now. Yes. It only took me 2 weeks. And those of you who are in the Bible study, the Parenting and Marriage Bible study, know part of that story. It only took me 2 weeks to court her and then to get engaged to her. So it didn't take me long. So yes, I was telling the truth. In January, I wasn't seeing anybody. And then in February 14th, I proposed to her and she said yes. So I started telling everybody and they all said I was crazy. Until they heard my story. And they were okay. So, what if I never get married? That is a fear. What if my kids don't live better than I do? Don't parents fear that? Parents think, my kids have to live better than we do. What if they won't take care of me when I get old? What if they abandon me, stick me in some home? Right? Will they abandon their faith when they get older? It's one of my fears. Well, a little bit. So our lives are lived in fear, and I want you to understand that those fears don't have to exist. That you can overcome them. There's no such thing as a secure job. There's no such thing as peace in the world. You know how every pageant, way back before everybody started moving away from that because it was so cliche. Oh, what do you want? I want peace in the world. That's never going to happen. So if we find our security in any of these things, it's going to unravel. You're going to lose it, and then you're going to be disappointed, and your foundation is going to end up being destroyed, and your life is going to crumble. So if you find your security in your mate, your intelligence, your grades, your skills, your looks, your position at work or your business, whatever you own, your IRA, your GPA, it's going to crumble. And you don't have security in that ultimately. So in order to live without fear, we have to understand something, because the disciples didn't understand it. So God, Jesus had to teach them. Notice how the disciples transfer their fears. Okay? They went from one fear to another fear. They went from the fear of the storm to the fear of the one who controlled the storm. Fear is what they did. Fear is how they lived. A bigger and better fear came along, and so they feared the bigger and the better thing. One fear to another. So if you're going to live by fear, there's always a bigger one. So Jesus wanted to relieve them of some of this, and he did. But, compassionately speaking, if Jesus wanted to relieve them of the fear of the storm, he could have done it a better way. I mean, he could have sped up the boat and they could have reached the other side very, very quickly, and everybody would have been glad it was over. I mean, now they're on solid ground, they're not afraid of drowning. they can get into some shelter because they're on shore. He could have done that.